What is linguistics? Introduction. Linguistics is a multifaceted field that delves into the intricate workings of human language, exploring its structure, function, evolution, and impact on society. It encompasses a wide range of subfields, each offering unique perspectives on this complex phenomenon. A linguist is someone who studies and describes the structure and composition of language and/or languages in a methodical and rigorous manner. Core fields of linguistics. 1. Phonetics and phonology. Phonetics is a scientific study of speech sounds. It investigates how sounds are produced, transmitted, and perceived. It has 3 subfields. A. Articulatory phonetics examines how speech sounds are produced by the vocal tract, including the movements of the lips, tongue, and vocal cords. B. Acoustic phonetics studies the physical properties of sound waves produced in speech. C. Auditory phonetics explores how the human ear perceives and processes speech sounds. Phonology studies how sounds are organized and patterned within a specific language. It focuses on how sounds function to distinguish meaning in a language. Phonology also investigates how sounds can change in a different context, such as the process of assimilation where sounds become more similar to neighboring sounds. Phonemes are the smallest units of sounds that can distinguish meaning in a language. For example, the p and b sounds in English are phonemes because they can distinguish words like pat and bat. Allophones are variations of a phoneme that do not change the meaning of a word. For example, the aspirated p sound at the beginning of pat and the unaspirated p sound at the end of stop are allophones of the same phoneme p. 2. Morphology. This subfield of linguistics investigates the structure of words, examining how they are formed and how they relate to other words in language. Morphemes are the smallest units of meaning in a language. They can be free morphemes, words that can stand alone, such as cat or run, or bound morphemes that cannot stand alone, such as suffixes like ed or prefixes like on. Morphology examines how morphemes are combined to form complex words, such as the combination of the root word happy with the suffix ness to form happiness. It also investigates how morphemes change their form depending on the grammatical context, such as the plural morpheme s that changes its pronunciation depending on the preceding sound, e.g. cats, dogs, horses. 3. Syntax. Syntax delves into the structure of sentences, exploring how words are combined to form phrases and clauses. It examines grammatical rules that govern word order, sentence structure, and how different sentence types are constructed. For example, in English, the subject typically precedes the verb in declarative sentences. The cat sat on the mat, while in other languages, the verb may precede the subject. Syntax also investigates how structure of a sentence can affect its meaning. For example, the sentence, the dog chased the cat has a different meaning than the cat chased the dog, even though the same words are used. Syntactic analysis involves identifying the different parts of speech, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and etc., and how they function within a sentence. It also involves understanding how phrases and clauses are structured and how they relate to other. Semantics and pragmatics. Semantics is concerned with the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences. It explores how lexical meanings are composed, examining the relationship between words such as synonymy, words with similar meanings, antonymy, words with opposite meanings, and hyponymy, words that are subordinate to other words, such as dog being a hyponym of animal. Linguistic semantics is informed by insights from philosophy, psychology, sociology, and computer science. Notions of truth and compositionality are crucial in determining meaning, but so too are the cognitive processes of language users. Pragmatics examines how language is used in context. It considers how factors like social conventions, speaker intentions, and the relationship between speakers influence the interpretation of utterances. An utterance is a sentence or sentence fragment used by a particular speaker on some particular occasion, with attention to the context in which the utterances are made. Pragmatics explores how language is used to perform actions, e.g., making requests, giving order, asking questions. How it is used to establish and maintain social relationships, and how it is used to convey subtle nuances of meaning that go beyond the literal interpretation of words. For example, the utterance, "It's cold in here," can be interpreted as a simple statement of fact, or it can be a request to close the window, depending on the context and the speaker's intention. Historical linguistics and languages through the time. Languages are constantly evolving. Historical linguistics investigates how languages change over time, examining sound shifts, grammatical changes, and lexical borrowing. Historical linguistics can help us understand the relationships between different languages, the history of human language, and the factors that drive language change. For example, sound shifts are systematic changes in the pronunciation of sounds in a language over time. Grammatical changes can involve changes in word order, the development of new grammatical categories, and the loss of old ones. Lexical borrowing is the process by which words are borrowed from other languages. For example, many English words are derived from French, Latin, and Greek. A short history of linguistics. Modern linguistics developed from the investigations of the new grammarians into the origins and interrelations of Indo-European languages, which eventually merged with a mushrooming interest in the non-Indo-European languages of Native Americans and the people of Africa, Asia, and Australia. This interest was partly motivated by a fascination with exotic cultures and languages, and partly by ideas for generating literacy and education in indigenous languages. The development of linguistics was spurred on by technological advances during the 19th to the 21st centuries that have facilitated detailed study of the spoken medium and of the processes of language interaction. Theoretical perspectives and approaches to linguistics. Modern linguistics began with structuralism, pioneered by Ferdinand de Saussure, and evolved with Chomsky's theories, focusing on syntax and cognitive aspects. Alternatives like cognitive and functional linguistics emphasize meaning, context, and social functions. 1. Structuralism and the Chomskyan Revolution. It is sometimes said that modern linguistics began with the posthumous publication of Ferdinand de Saussure's course, The Linguistique Générale, in 1916. Certainly, that work inspired structural linguistics in Europe, although Leonard Bloomfield's language of 1933 was a greater influence on American structuralist linguistics. Structuralism emphasized the underlying structures and patterns within language systems. It focuses on how language elements relate to each other and form a cohesive whole, rather than on their individual meaning. Structuralists analyze language in terms of its internal structure, examining how sounds, words, and sentences are organized and how they relate to each other within the system of a particular language. The structuralist doctrine is based on relationships of contrast among elements in a language. The Chomskyan Revolution began with the publication of syntactic structures in 1957, where structuralism induced language structures bottom up from the constituent analysis of stretches of language. Chomsky's theory of syntax was a model that proposed top-down analysis of a phrase marker generated from an initial symbol S, sentence, into its constituent phrase and their constituents, such the terminal constituents were morphemes inferred from the lexical. Noam Chomsky proposed that humans have an innate capacity for language, with a universal grammar that underlies all human languages. It focuses on the abstract rules and principles that govern language, emphasizing the generative nature of language and the role of mental representations. Chomsky's theory argues that children are born with a language acquisition device that allows them to quickly and effortlessly acquire the complex grammar of their native language. 2. Cognitive linguistics. Cognitive linguistics developed as an alternative vision to Chomsky's notions that syntax is autonomous and that the human language faculty is independent of other cognitive behavior. For cognitivists, linguistic abilities are embedded in perception, attention, memory, categorization, abstraction, creativity, and symbolic thought. Language is acquired from exposure to contextually dependent utterances on the basis of meaning, so corpora provide the most important source for data. Cognitivists focus on analogy and on the functional significance of metaphor and metonymy in language. In direct contrast with Chomskyan linguists, cognitive linguists argue that syntactic constructions are semantically and pragmatically motivated. 3. Functionalism. This approach emphasized the role of language in communication and social interaction. It focuses on how language structures and forms are shaped by the functions they serve. Functionalists argue that language is a tool for social interaction and that its structure is influenced by the communicative needs of its speaker. They examine how language is used to perform different social functions, such as expressing emotions, building relationships, and conveying social identity. Functional linguistics has a lot in common with cognitive linguistics. Functionalism looks to the functions of language within society as the motivation for language structure and the motivation for the meaningfulness of linguistic elements. In other words, functional linguistics holds that linguistic structures can only be understood and explained with references to the communicative functions of language. And it is a given that primary function of language is to be a vehicle for social interaction among human beings. Thus, communication influences but does not necessarily determine the forms that language takes. Functionalists assume that cognitive and socio-cultural factors explain linguistic phenomena. Syntax is semantically and pragmatically motivated. It exists for people to combine elements of meaning in a variety of dissimilar ways to capture different nuances of meaning. Corpora and discourse are more relevant to functionalist theorizing than are the decontextualized sentences of Chomsky-style linguistics. The intersection of linguistics with other disciplines. Some examples. 1. Sociolinguistics. This field examines the relationship between language and society, exploring how social factors like class, gender, ethnicity, and region influence language use. Sociolinguists investigate language variation, language attitudes, and the role of language in social identity. They study how language can be used to express social identity, to assert social status, and to negotiate social relationships. Sociolinguistics focuses on the variations of language used among different groups within a particular language community. Sociolinguistics also investigates language change through time by plotting the spreading adoption of new forms and the decay of old ones, which is often accelerated during periods of social stress and change. For example, concepts of politeness and offensiveness differ among different social groups, and such social conventions and their correlation with social relations are also topics relevant to sociolinguistics. 2. Psycholinguistics. This area investigates the cognitive processes involved in language use, including language comprehension, production, and memory. Psycholinguistics study how people understand and produce speech, how they process and store language in memory, and how they use language to think and reason. They investigate how factors such as attention, memory, and cognitive processing affect language use. Psycholinguistics draws from linguistics, psychology, cognitive science, and the study of language pathology. Psycholinguistics research cognitive and psychological aspects of the perception of categorical similarities and differences among phenomena. They investigate language production on the one hand and language processing and comprehension on the other. 3. Neurolinguistics. This field studies the brain mechanisms underlying language, exploring how different areas of the brain are involved in language processing. Neurolinguistics use techniques such as brain imaging to investigate how the brain processes speech, understands language, and produces speech. They study how brain damage can affect language abilities, such as the cases of aphasia, language disorders. Whereas psycholinguistics focuses on the human mind, neurolinguistics focuses on the allied psychological matter of the human brain, the organ that enables the cognitive abilities we associate with the mind. 4. Computational linguistics. This interdisciplinary field applies computer science to the study of language, developing tools for language processing, machine translation, and natural language understanding. Computational linguistics develop algorithms and software for tasks such as speech recognition, machine translation, and information retrieval. They also investigate how computers can be used to model and simulate human language processing. 5. Corpus linguistics. Corpus linguistics collates corpora of texts. Corpora have become important data sources of language expressions that are actually used by speakers rather than what it is intuitively believed to be used. They serve to check the grammaticality, acceptability judgments of native speakers. A corpus may comprise spoken and/or written texts, texts that date from different times, and/or texts that sample many genres and variety of language, or be restricted to just one or two. To aid researchers, a corpus designer may add to the source text metadata, markup, and annotation. Researchers then use computer-aided quantitative and qualitative method to investigate data from corpora in order to accomplish such things as establishing the frequency of language items and structures, their collocations and concordances.